The hallway outside room 306 is colder than the rest of the ICU. Not by much, maybe 2 degrees, but enough that it whispers against the skin when you walk past. The overhead lights hum with a different tone there, like an old radio tuning between stations. I used to think it was because of the wiring. This part of the hospital is older, after all, but lately, I've started wondering if it's something else. The air here doesn't move, and yet the shadows shift, like they have their own slow breath. My name is Elise. I'm 38, a night shift nurse in the ICU. I've worked at this hospital for 7 years. I used to love the quiet of the night shift, how the world seemed paused, and the chaos of the day softened into sighs and beeping monitors. But over the past year, I've started waking up with nosebleeds. My hands shake sometimes, and there's a weight behind my eyes that never goes away. My mind feels like it's buffering constantly, like a screen that never quite loads. I didn't think room 306 would ever be part of my rounds. Officially, it's been out of commission for 3 years. The story goes that the ceiling leaked from a burst pipe above and caused some structural damage. They put a broken mop handle through the latch on the supply room door in front of it to keep it blocked off. No one had a reason to go in there, until 2 weeks ago. It started small. The patient in room 302, a stroke survivor named Mrs. Bell, asked me one night if someone had finally moved into 306. I told her no, and she just stared at the ceiling for a while, her fingers twitching like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. I assumed she was confused, which wasn't uncommon after a major stroke. Still, something about the way she said it stuck with me. The next night, she rang the call button just after 3 a.m. I came in and found her crying, not sobbing, but those quiet gasping tears of someone trying not to fall apart. She kept pointing toward the supply closet. She said I shouldn't be here, she whispered. The girl, she said I'm in her room. I checked the hallway, nothing. The closet was still jammed shut by the broken handle, but when I pressed my ear to the wood, I could hear it, a soft tapping, not rhythmic, not like water, like fingernails, tentative and slow. After that, I began hearing it on my own. I told myself it was rats, or the pipes, or maybe just wind trapped in old air vents, but rats don't whisper your name. Pipes don't cry softly when you pass. Wind doesn't say, please don't forget me. One night, maybe out of morbid curiosity, or sheer fatigue, I waited until the end of my shift, 4:52 a.m. I slipped off my gloves and walked to the supply door. I removed the mop handle. The door creaked open more easily than it should have. Behind it, the door to room 306 stood slightly ajar. The air inside was stale, thick, like syrup. There was still some medical supplies left on a shelf: gauze, an old IV stand, a toppled plastic water pitcher with a faded blue lid. The bed was there too, covered in a wrinkled white sheet. Everything was coated in dust, but I swear I could still smell antiseptic, faint and sour. As I stepped inside, my breath caught. There was someone sitting in the chair by the window, a girl, maybe 13 or 14, wearing a hospital gown. Her hair was long and black, but clumped and uneven, like it had fallen out in patches. Her face was pale, almost waxy, and she stared at me without blinking. I told her she couldn't stay. The girl said. My mouth was dry. Who? The old woman. That's my bed. They promised I could stay until I got better. She turned her face toward the bed, and the sheet rose slightly, as if something underneath it moved. I backed out of the room, heart hammering, and slammed the door shut. I jammed the mop handle back in place, hands trembling. I stood there for a long moment, listening. No footsteps, no voice, just silence. I called in sick the next night. I thought I might be losing my mind. I hadn't been sleeping well. I blamed stress, burnout, but when I returned 2 nights later, Mrs. Bell was gone. I asked where she was. Transferred, discharged. She passed in the early morning. The charge nurse told me, heart failure. She was stable until just before sunrise. Her final notes were strange. Elevated heart rate, repeated muttering about a girl, trying to get out of bed, reaching toward the wall between her room and the supply closet. They said she died, clutching her blanket, curled up like a child. The hospital sealed room 306 for good last week, not with a mop handle, with a metal chain and lock. No work order, no construction crew, just locked. The kind of locked that says we don't talk about this anymore. But every night since, I've heard knocking, not loud, just steady. Tap, tap, tap. The cleaning crew avoids that hallway now. Even when the machines are on, even when the lights are bright, you can feel it. The sense of being watched from behind a locked door. I've seen aides start down the hall, only to stop, turn and pretend they forgot something. I still do my rounds. I smile at families. I chart like nothing's wrong. But every time I walk past that section of the ICU, my heart skips a beat. There's a part of me that wants to open the door again, to see if she's still there. But there's a bigger part that knows some doors shouldn't be opened twice. She's still in there, waiting. And worse, I think she remembers me. Sometimes when I pass room 302, I think I see something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of white, like a gown. But it's always gone by the time I look. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? Ghost stories are for bored interns and old janitors, not for nurses with degrees, and patient charts and night shifts that never end. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I know that every night, at 4:52 a.m., the air by room 306 turns just a little bit colder. I think she's waiting for someone to remember her name, but I don't know it. No one does. That might be the worst part. Being forgotten hurts more than dying. Hospitals have a hum to them. If you've ever been in one during the dead of night, you know what I mean. It's not loud, it's barely noticeable, but it's there. A low, steady rhythm of machines, the occasional cough, and the hiss of vents. I'm Darren, 31, a night shift nurse in the ICU. I've been working here for 7 years. Night shifts suit me. Less chaos, fewer visitors, and more time to actually take care of patients. But they also mean more silence. And silence has a way of letting the wrong things in. I first noticed the whispering about a year ago. There's a small break room just above the ICU, next to the maintenance corridor. It's always been a bit colder than the rest of the unit, and the air vent in the corner hisses a little louder than it should. I used to go there for my 3 a.m. coffee, sit in the dim light, listen to lo-fi jazz on my phone, and just breathe. But one night, I turned off the music, and I heard something, a whisper, soft, unclear, like someone breathing words into the vent. At first I thought it was the ductwork, old pipes, maybe a loose filter, but the next night, it happened again, and the next, always around the same time, between 2:50 and 3:10 a.m. The words were never clear. Sometimes I thought I caught fragments. Not yet, almost wait. Always 1 or 2 syllables, buried under the breath of the building. I didn't mention it to anyone. You don't last long in this job if you start telling people you hear voices. So I wrote it off as fatigue, stress, lack of sleep, the usual suspects, until one night, I heard a name, Mrs. Avery. I froze mid-sip. It wasn't just the name, it was the way it was said, delicate, as if the voice wasn't talking to me, but remembering her. Mrs. Avery was a patient in bed 6. Stroke, non-responsive. We'd been keeping her stable for days. No major issues, no signs of deterioration. At 3:12 a.m., she coded. We tried everything, compressions, meds, the crash cart, but she was gone within minutes. I didn't make the connection until much later, when I was sitting alone again, coffee cold, staring at the vent. I told myself it was a coincidence, had to be, but then came another night, another whisper, another name. This time it was Jonas, a new admission, fresh out of surgery, young, only 42, no complications expected. He coded at 3:05 a.m. This time, I felt something shift in my gut, the kind of dread you don't talk about. I started keeping a journal. I wrote down every whisper I thought I heard, the dates, the words, the patient names, and every time I heard a name, the person died within 20 minutes. Sometimes it was subtle, other times it was like the vent exhaled the name. Tired of holding it in, I began to wonder, was it predicting death or causing it? I tried skipping the break room, but the whispers followed. One night, I was stocking the med cart near the west hallway, and I heard it again. A rasp of breath, just behind my shoulder. This time it said my name. I spun around. Nothing, no one, just the air, and its quiet noise. I didn't sleep that day. I told myself I was hallucinating. Auditory tricks, stress-induced psychosis. Every nurse burns out at some point. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. The next night, I walked into room 4. A patient had spiked a fever, and I was doing rounds. He was half asleep, hooked to the monitor, vitals stable. When he saw me, he smiled faintly. "You're Darren, right?" I nodded. He whispered, "You heard it too." I froze. "What?" "The voice in the air," he said. "I heard it say your name." That was the last thing he ever said. He died 20 minutes later. Massive pulmonary embolism. No warning signs. I sat in the hallway after they wheeled him out, staring at the blank screen of the monitor, thinking about what he said. "You heard it too." I wasn't alone. I started asking around, casually at first. A few nurses gave me strange looks. One said the break room always creeped her out. Another said she felt like someone was breathing down her neck when she charted near the vents, but no one admitted hearing voices. One night, I recorded the break room vent, just set my phone down on the table and hit record while I stepped out. When I listened to the audio later, it was just noise, hissing, but somewhere near the end, buried under static, was something. It wasn't clear, but it wasn't random. I played it for a friend who works in sound design. He ran it through software and isolated the frequencies. "Someone's whispering," he said. "It's faint, but there's a human voice layered in the white noise." "What's it saying?" I asked. He paused. "Sounds like, 'It's your turn.'" I stopped using that break room. Now I chart in the main hallway. I keep earbuds in, but I don't play music anymore. I just want something blocking out the hiss. But even with that I still hear it. Last week, I found a patient staring at the ceiling. No monitor, no beeping, just silence. She said, "I think I saw it." "Saw what?" I asked. "The thing that speaks in the walls," she whispered. "It doesn't have a face." She died that night. I've stopped trying to understand it. There's something in this ICU, something that knows. It breathes with the vents. It speaks when no one listens, and it always knows who's next. It's not angry. It doesn't warn. It just speaks. Softly, like a sigh, and that's enough. Now every time I hear my name again, I wonder, is it calling me, or just remembering me, before I'm gone? ICUs never really sleep, even in the deepest hours of the night. Around 4 a.m., When most bodies surrender to exhaustion, there's always a machine beeping, a call light flashing, a sigh rising from some corner, but the still bed remained silent. We called it that. Unofficially, of course, bed 9, nearest the supply closet, beneath the old ceiling vent that buzzed faintly when the lights dimmed. It had no patients on record, not in the 3 years I'd been working night shifts here. My name is Rosa. I'm 38. I'm a night nurse here in the ICU. I've been on this floor since my 2nd year out of school, and I used to believe I was grounded, rational. I dealt with suffering by focusing on data, dosages, and charts. I had to. If I let the grief in, I wouldn't last a week. But this still bed got to me. The first time I noticed something was off, I had just finished rounds and was restocking gloves near bed 9. I dropped a box and bent down to grab it. When I stood up, I swore I saw someone lying in the bed, only for a second, just the shape of a body under the blanket, head slightly turned, hands folded across the chest, then gone, just empty sheets. I checked the board. No one was assigned to bed 9, no admissions pending, no overflow, just an unused inactive station. I told myself it was a trick of the light. I hadn't eaten since noon. Maybe I was lightheaded. But a few nights later, it happened again. This time I was logging meds, and a patient coded 2 beds down. Chaos erupted. Crash cart rolling in, chest compressions, shouted vitals. I was focused. Everyone was, but amid all the noise, I heard something quiet. A monitor, a steady rhythmic beep, the kind that signals a heartbeat. I turned. It was coming from bed 9. The monitor was on, showing vitals, pulse 72 BPM, BP 118/79, respiration 16. But there was no patient, no chart, no reason for that monitor to be active. I reached for the plug, and just before I touched it, the vitals flatlined, all zeros. I yanked the cord out. The screen went dark. Later that morning, the tech swore the monitor had been unplugged all night. Might be a ghost in the machine, he joked. I didn't laugh. I began to avoid bed 9, took longer routes around the unit, left the lights a little brighter near that corner. But one night, I caught a new hire, Adam, fresh out of school, prepping the bed. "What are you doing?" I asked, more sharply than I meant. He looked confused. "They told me to ready this station. We've got a transfer from surgical coming up." I froze. "Who told you?" He paused. "I thought it was you." I hadn't spoken to him all night. Still, he finished prepping. The linens were fresh. Monitor calibrated. Call button tested. I watched from a distance, chest tight. The patient never arrived. Apparently, the transfer was cancelled at the last second. The bed remained empty. That morning, Adam didn't clock out. When I texted him later, he replied, "Sorry, Rosa, I quit. There was someone in that bed last night. I know I saw them. Their eyes were open." He never came back. I didn't blame him. After that, I started asking around, quietly, and that's when I learned the term, the still bed protocol. It wasn't official, not in any manual, but every long-timer on night shift knew it. If a patient ever had to be assigned to bed 9, the staff would make sure they were moved before sunrise, one way or another. Some claimed it was just superstition, that bed 9 had bad wiring. Others hinted at rumors, patients crashing without cause, monitors glitching, morphine drips draining twice as fast. But the worst stories, the ones where the patient would start talking to someone no one else could see, usually around 3 a.m. One nurse said she caught a woman whispering, Why are they crying? Over and over. But there was no one else in the room. Another said a man in bed 9 begged them to get the children out of the walls. I stopped sleeping during the day. I started dreaming of empty hospital beds in wide white rooms, all facing toward a single corner I couldn't look at. One night, our census surged. An emergency diversion rerouted 3 critical patients to our unit. All other beds were full, and bed 9. We had no choice. We put a man there, elderly, post-op, semi-conscious. I stayed near the room all night, checking his vitals every hour. At 2:58 a.m., I peeked in. He was sleeping, breathing slow, steady. At 3:01 a.m., he flatlined. We rushed in, tried everything, but something felt wrong. Like the moment we entered, we were already too late. When I reached to turn off the monitor, I noticed something. The timestamp of death, 3 a.m. Exactly. No beep, no alarm, just stillness. The morning shift came in. We moved the body, cleaned the station. That's when I saw it. A handprint, small, too small to belong to our patient, pressed into the condensation on the monitor screen, like a child had touched it from inside. I wiped it away before anyone else saw. Now bed 9 stays dark. I unplugged the monitor myself. I've spoken to management, suggested marking it as permanently inactive. They nod, then forget. But I remember, every night, and sometimes, when the floor is quiet, and I'm checking supplies, I hear the faint buzz of the monitor, and I don't look, because some beds aren't meant for the living, they just wait. I never liked room 12BC. The moment I step onto that floor, the air thickens, a silence so dense, it feels like it's pushing against my chest. And the lights, they're never right. They flicker in that slow, almost deliberate way. Not like a malfunction, but like they're trying to tell you something. I'm Beth. I've been a night nurse in this unit for 7 years now. I've seen things that make you question everything you thought you knew. But 12BC, 12B something else entirely. It was the first room I was ever assigned to on the overnight shift. At the time, I had no idea it would become my personal nightmare. Room 12BC is located at the end of the hallway. It's the last room, on the right, just before the emergency exit. Its door sticks sometimes, and the lock is always finicky, but it's the lights that get to me. That flickering. I used to think it was just the overhead lights on the floor. Nothing special, but no. It's only 12BC. The light inside that room flickers like it's struggling to keep itself lit. I remember the first patient I had there, old Mrs. Lowell, a sweet lady with silver hair and glasses that seemed too big for her face. She'd been admitted after a stroke, and she was struggling with aphasia, unable to speak clearly, her words coming out as nothing more than fragments of thoughts. She was scared of the dark. I think most people in her condition are. When the night shift began, she insisted that I leave the light on in her room. I agreed, of course. It was part of the routine, but that night, something felt wrong. It was the way she stared at the ceiling, the way her hands twisted the sheets. "Beth," she whispered, so faint, I almost missed it. "The lights, they blink, they blink." I tried to calm her down, brushing it off. "It's nothing, Mrs. Lowell, just a little flicker, it'll pass." But it didn't pass. The light blinked, a brief fast strobe, then steadied, then blinked again. Each time, the room seemed to grow colder, the air thicker. Mrs. Lowell's eyes widened in fear. "Don't let them come," she begged, her voice barely a whisper. "Who?" I asked, confused, but she just stared at the light, her pupils dilated, her hand trembling as it reached for mine. "The lights. Don't let them come." I was about to reassure her when the door swung open, and Dr. Warren entered, his usual stoic expression on his face. He took one look at Mrs. Lowell, and sighed. "She's been seeing things again. The stroke did a number on her." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of unease, as the light flickered again, this time longer, almost as if in response. I should have said something. I should have told him about the strange feeling in the room, the light, the way Mrs. Lowell was acting. But I didn't. I simply left it. The next morning, Mrs. Lowell passed away in her sleep. It was peaceful as it could be. I felt a pang of sadness, but something lingered in my mind. The way she'd looked at that light, the way she'd begged me to stop them from coming. That was the first time I noticed the flickering wasn't normal. It was like the light knew something was happening, like it was trying to warn us, but no one else noticed. After that, I became more sensitive to the room. Every time I entered, I could feel a pressure in my chest, and the light would flicker, just enough to make you question your own sanity. I began to dread the nights I was assigned to 12B. One evening, a new patient was admitted, a man in his 50s, Mr. Carver, admitted for heart failure. He seemed calm, but there was something about him, the way his eyes darted to the corners of the room, the way he would constantly glance up at the ceiling. I did my usual rounds, checking on the other patients, but when I entered 12B, I could feel it, the flicker. "Beth," Mr. Carver said suddenly, his voice hoarse. "The lights, they talked to me." I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "They blink, don't they?" He motioned toward the light. "They blink when they want something, when they're hungry." I felt a cold sweat on the back of my neck. The flickering was subtle but relentless, like it had a pulse of its own. "It's just a malfunction," I said quickly. "Don't worry about it." But he wasn't listening. His eyes were wide, his breath shallow. "They want my soul, Beth. You have to stop them before they come for you too." I tried to calm him down, but the light flickered again, faster this time, the hum of the bulb growing louder, like it was in my head. Mr. Carver's eyes rolled back in his head. He jerked upward in the bed, his hands clawing at the sheets. "They're coming for me. They're coming." I backed away in fear, unsure of what to do. The lights flickered once more, and then silence. The tension in the room snapped. Mr. Carver collapsed back into the bed. Still, he was dead. I couldn't explain it. The doctors couldn't either. There was no medical reason for his sudden death. But I knew what had happened. The light had taken him. I've never been the same since. Room 12B is a cursed place. I'm convinced of it. I've heard other nurses talk about it, whispering about the strange occurrences, the flickering lights, the feeling of being watched. Some say it's just a fault in the electrical wiring, but I know it's more than that. There have been other patients in 12B since then, other nurses assigned to the room. Some have stayed there for hours, others for days, but no one makes it through the night without feeling the pull of the light. It's not just the flickering, either. It's the way it feels like someone is watching, waiting, just beyond the edge of the darkness. The way the air feels thicker, colder, the longer you stay in that room. I won't go back, not to 12B, not ever again. I've worked the night shift in this hospital for 8 years. It's not glamorous, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But over the years, I've learned to embrace the solitude, the silence, the rhythm of the night. But sometimes, there are things that happen when the night seems too still, when the silence feels too deep. My name is Lena. I'm a night nurse in the orthopedics ward, primarily tasked with looking after patients recovering from surgeries. It's not too hard to manage, mostly routine, but there are nights when I feel something else in the air, something heavy, I try not to think too much about it, but that doesn't stop the dread from creeping in, especially when I'm assigned to the far hallway of the unit, the part where the lights flicker and shadows play tricks on your mind. One night, as I made my rounds, I noticed that the hallway was unnaturally dark. I checked the time. It was almost 2 a.m. All the rooms were quiet, the low hum of machines the only sound, but something felt off, as if the air itself had thickened. I passed the end of the corridor, where the hall branches off into a forgotten wing. Most people avoid that part of the hospital. It's old, unused, and there are rumors about it being haunted. I never put much stock in those rumors, but something about the hallway, it always gets to me. There's a feeling that follows you. It's like someone's watching you from just out of sight. I was halfway down the hall when I heard it. The sound of footsteps, not the steady, predictable sound of shoes on linoleum. No, these were soft, almost padded, like someone moving with purpose, but trying not to be heard. At first, I thought it was one of the other nurses, but when I glanced back, there was no one there. I continued walking, telling myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shape, just at the edge of the hallway. It was barely visible, just a dark silhouette, and yet it felt as if it was pulling the light from the room, sucking it in like a black hole. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I thought I'd imagined it, but when I blinked, it was still there, just at the edge of my vision, shifting slightly, as if it was waiting for me to notice it. The shadows in the hallway seemed to deepen, stretching unnaturally toward that shape. I took a step back, my breath quickening. I was afraid to turn around, but I had to. I had to see what it was. So I turned and looked straight at the space. It was gone. I stood there for a moment, waiting. My pulse raced, my mind a swirl of questions. What had I seen? Was it real, or had the exhaustion of the night shift finally caught up with me? I wasn't sure, but the feeling lingered, that strange eerie weight pressing on my chest. It felt wrong, like something was not just watching me, but waiting. I had a patient in room 307 who had just undergone a hip replacement. He was recovering well, and I should have checked on him, but I couldn't shake the sensation of being followed, of something lurking behind me, in the dark, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to ignore it, but the more I thought about it, the stronger the fear became. I had to check on him. I turned down the hallway, trying to focus on the task at hand, but the closer I got to room 307, the more I felt that weight pressing down on me. It was as if the hallway was growing longer. With each step, the walls seemed to close in, the lights flickered, and then I heard it again. The footsteps, soft shuffling steps, slow and deliberate, like they were trying to match my pace. They were getting closer. I turned sharply, my breath caught in my throat, but again, there was nothing there. No one, just the dim hallway, and the dark, oppressive silence. I reached room 307, and entered quickly, as if the safety of the room would protect me from whatever I had just felt. Mr. Harper, my patient, lay there, eyes closed, the rhythmic beat of his heart monitor a soothing contrast to the terror crawling up my spine. I checked his vitals and adjusted the IV, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. When I turned to leave, I saw it again, that shape. It was standing in the hallway, right outside room 307. This time, I could make out a figure, tall and unnaturally thin, like a shadow stretching upward. It seemed to move, Not walking, but gliding. It was a human shape, but not quite human. Too tall, too slender, too wrong. I backed away, my heart racing. I was frozen, my legs heavy, refusing to obey my mind's frantic command to run. The shape shifted, and I could feel its presence in my chest, pressing against my ribcage, squeezing the air from my lungs. "Lena," it whispered. The voice wasn't human. It was cold, distant, as if it were coming from the farthest reaches of my mind. I gasped. "Who's there?" I stammered, but no answer came. Just that eerie, heavy silence. As the shape loomed closer, I took a step backward, then another, and another, until I was out of the room, pressing myself against the far wall, desperate to keep my eyes on the shape. It was still there, still moving slowly toward me, and then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. I stood there, for what felt like an eternity, heart pounding, eyes darting across the hallway, waiting for the shape to reappear. But it didn't. The silence was all-encompassing, the weight on my chest slowly lifting, but not completely gone. I didn't leave the hallway for the rest of the night. I stayed by the nurse's station, pretending to work, glancing at the dark corners of the hallway, waiting for the shape to come back. It never did. By morning, I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I had to finish my rounds, finish the paperwork, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me, watching. When the day shift nurses arrived, I didn't mention the shape. I didn't mention the footsteps, or the whisper. I didn't think they would believe me anyway. But I never walked that hallway alone again.